Good evening. The City of Bothell Planning Commission meeting will come to order for Wednesday, September 3rd. And so in the first step in our agenda, we will take any non-agenda public comments, if there are any. Hearing none at this point, we'll move to an approval of minutes. And so my opening question of my commissioners is, are there any discussion on any of the minutes, June 4th, 18th, 25th, July 9th, or 23rd? Seeing and hearing none, I would entertain a motion to approve all of these minutes, if there's, and then we can take a vote on that.
Yeah, I move that we approve the minutes for June 4th, 2014, June 18th, June 25th, July 9th, and July 23rd.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Let the record show that the motion passed unanimously. I should also add that all the commissioners are here, present and accounted for, except for Commissioner Stedman, who is absent and excused. At this point, we're going to move on in our agenda to a continuation of the public hearing on the 2015 Periodic Plan and Code Update. And I know we're going to get a briefing from Gary Hassler on this, and I would provide as just some introductory guidance for the Planning Commission that this will be our first hearing on the land use element of our plan, and it's I think one of the key elements of what we as Planning Commissioners do. And not that any of them are not important, but I would just put extra emphasis on this particular one. It's a sizable packet that we have before us. We don't have to get this all resolved today. We will have our next meeting actually on our agenda is set for September 24th. So, but I look forward to a good introductory session here. And so, Gary, take the lead at this point. And maybe as you conclude your comments, just provide us with what you think you would like to have the Planning Commission do today. So where could we particularly help here at the end of this meeting?
Certainly, Steve. I'd be glad to do that. Good evening, Commissioners, and hope you all had a good summer. I actually have a slide at the end of my presentation talking about the next steps on the land use elements. So
Great.
When we get to that, I think it's be a perfect place to discuss that. I'm going to go up to the podium. I do have a presentation for you. Hopefully it's not a lengthy presentation, but as you know from your packet, there is quite a bit of material there. So I'll try to go through it in as timely fashion as possible. And first I'm going to step up and turn the light down above your dais. Before I actually launch into the presentation, as Steve already mentioned, the land use element is sort of the cornerstone of the comprehensive plan. Not surprisingly, since we're talking about planning, we're talking about land use and the future form and shape of the city. We've got tonight scheduled for this, and my hope tonight is basically just to give you a lot of information. We did the same thing when we brought the housing element to you because there was a lot of information and data in that element. And the same with tonight. In addition, the issues we're going to discuss tonight can be complex, and a couple of them are sort of interlinked. So I didn't want to try and throw too much at you tonight and bring an annotated staff recommendation. So we'll be doing that on the 24th, or at least I think most of an annotated recommendation. So with that, I'll move on. This first slide you've seen before, but since we're getting back into the plan update after a summer recess, I thought I'd provide the first slide again, and I'll go through it fairly quickly for anybody who might be watching and just to refresh our minds too. The Washington State Growth Management Act requires the periodic updating of local comprehensive plans and development regulations, and in 2011 the state legislature established deadlines for the next periodic update. In accordance with that schedule, we have to have our plan updated by June 30th of next year. The primary purpose of the 2015 Periodic Plan and Code Update is to ensure that local plans and regulations comply with all requirements of the GMA. We anticipate that the Periodic Plan and Code Update will comprise the bulk of your work for this year, as we're well into that now. And the early part of 2015, and the bulk of the Council's land use item work for the first half of 2015, again with adoption by June 30th of next year. The land use element is a required plan element under the Growth Management Act, and the RCW citation is there for the GMA. There are a number of issues that we need to address in the land use element, and I'll mention each one briefly here in a list and then talk about each in more detail in subsequent slides. The first issue we have to deal with is the accommodation of a population capacity shortfall in the Snohomish County portion of the city. And that's based on Vision 2040 growth targets, which we'll talk about more, and the 2013 Snohomish County Buildable Lands Report. Another issue is the integration of something called Transfer of Development Rights, or TDR, into the plan. That issue, as you'll find out, as you'll see, intertwines pretty closely with the first one, with the population capacity shortfall. The third issue are proposed amendments to Land Use Element Policy P4 to exclude from the calculations for net buildable area surface stormwater retention, detention, and water quality facilities. The next issue is a review of the element in consideration of new GMA requirements to consider utilizing urban planning approaches that promote physical activity. We'll talk about that a little bit in a subsequent slide. The next issue is related to that physical activity requirement, the inclusion of 2 policies and 2 actions from the community services element, which, if you recall, is proposed to be deleted from the plan. We moved some of those policies and actions into the new housing and human services element, and 2 more policies and 2 more actions are proposed to be moved to the land use element. And they both, the policies, I think, directly address this physical activity requirement in the GMA. And then the final issue is an issue that was brought up by a citizen, and she's here in the audience tonight. This is Joanne Harkonnen. As part of the 2014 Council Docket of Plan and Code Amendments, Mrs. Harkonnen submitted a request to the Council to have them initiate potential code amendments regarding BMC 1206-140, B9 specifically, which permits up to 8 unrelated persons to occupy a single-family dwelling. In initiating the item, Council initiated it as a Planning Commission review of the item. They didn't specifically state initiation of a proposed plan or code amendment. In addition to those major issues, there are some other proposed revisions that we'll be bringing forward with the element. Those include update of the background and analysis section to reflect 2012 and 2014 annexations, including annexation of all 9 designated potential annexation areas in King County portion of the planning area, as well as update of the growth targets and capacity section of the element to reflect the 2013 Snohomish County Buildable Lands Report and the 2014 King County Buildable Lands Report. You'll notice that in the current element, which is in your packet, there's a fairly lengthy section about buildable lands and capacity. And we're proposing to make that considerably smaller, and consistent with our goal of simplifying the plan, and instead putting both of those buildable lands reports, attaching those as appendices to the plan in their entirety. And then, as with all of the other elements, minor revisions to update text throughout the element, to update items and get rid of things that are no longer needed or have been accomplished or are simply out of date. Okay, so let's talk about the major issues that we think are facing us with the land use element a little bit. And the first one has to do with the Vision 2040 growth targets. Bill and I have talked to you about these in the past, but to refresh your memory, because I don't think this stuff stays in anyone's memory very long, I've given you a brief overview here. So the Growth Management Act requires adjacent counties with populations of 450,000 or more to adopt multi-county planning policies, or MPPs, in order to provide a common planning framework for urban areas throughout those counties. And those counties are King, Snohomish, Pierce, and Kitsap. In 1995, the Puget Sound Regional Council adopted Vision 2020, which incorporated the 4 counties' initial MPPs under the GMA. In 2008, the PSRC adopted Vision 2040, which is an update and a refinement of the Vision 2020 framework. Vision 2040 presents a regional growth strategy, or RGS, which outlines how growth within the four-county region is to be distributed among 7 regional geographies. So growth is not allocated to specific cities or specific counties necessarily. It's allocated via these regional geographies. And those regional geographies are metropolitan cities. Those are places like Seattle and Everett and Bellevue. Core cities, of which Bothell is one. Larger cities, small cities, unincorporated urban growth areas, rural areas, and natural resource lands. The RGS, states Vision 2040, focuses the majority of the region's housing and employment growth into metropolitan cities and core cities, which together comprise more than 24 designated regional growth centers. The centers in these cities are intended to attract residents and businesses because of their proximity to services and jobs, a variety of housing types, access to regional amenities, high-quality transit service, and other advantages. So to put it very simply, they're trying to attract growth and everything that comes with growth into concentrated areas called regional growth centers. Under the RGS, Bothell is a core city, and Bothell was assigned this regional geography in Vision 2040 by virtue of the fact that the Canyon Park area has been designated an urban center since Vision 2020 was adopted in 1995. Urban centers became regional growth centers in Vision 2040. They changed the terminology. For each of the counties, Vision 2040 assigns total population and employment targets by each of the regional geographies. Because the Canyon Park area is a designated regional growth center, the growth targets for the Snohomish County portion of Bothell are more intensive than those for the King County portion. Does that make sense to everyone? So we have a regional growth center designated in the Snohomish County portion of the city. It's the Canyon Park area. So the targets for that area are more intense than they are in the King County portion of the city. And that's important, as we'll see in just a minute, because of this capacity shortfall in the Snohomish County portion. Oops. So, Bothell's population and employment targets under Vision 2040 and the available capacity to meet those targets break down as follows. So the table shows the county portion in the city, the King County portion. The first column is a 2035 population target in additional persons. The second column shows the population capacity, either a surplus or a deficit that we have to try and meet that target. And then it does the same thing for employment, and again, broken down by county. So you can see that the city has a population surplus, capacity surplus within the King County portion of the city, but a population deficit within the Snohomish County portion. And that deficit in Snohomish County portion is just over 3,500 persons. So that's what we need to try and accommodate in the Snohomish County portion of the city. With regards to employment, we have a surplus in both the King and Snohomish County portions of the city. So we're okay as far as population in King County and employment in both, and we need to make up this deficit in the Snohomish County portion. When we discovered that we had this population capacity shortfall in the Snohomish County portion, we worked with the other cities within Snohomish County, the southwest urban growth area in Snohomish County, to try and determine approaches to addressing the shortfall. And at the staff level, we came up with 3 potential scenarios to address that shortfall in the Snohomish County portion. The first was adding an RAC designation, or Residential Activity Center designation, to Canyon Park. Canyon Park is currently designated for commercial, business, and light industrial uses, and currently has no residential designation. Following this slide, I have a map that shows these 3 scenarios, but I'll go through them quickly. The second is to add a residential designation, either R2800, 4000, or RAC, to Country Village, as part of what we're calling an expanded Red Barn Village. Country Village is currently designated commercial business and again has no residential designation. And the third scenario was adding a higher density residential designation to the FEMA site on 228th Street Southwest, which is currently designated R9600 for single family. In addition, there's a small parcel on the north side of 228th Street Southwest that would be included. When we came up with these three options, we provided a range of potential designations within the Red Barn, expanded Red Barn Village and FEMA site, primarily because we wanted to see what the capacity, the residential capacity numbers look like for different scenarios. When we first thought of them, we didn't know what the numbers would look like until we ran the numbers. So it made sense to come up with more than one potential designation. And also because options are usually a good thing. So here's a map, and I apologize for this being a little bit dark. This is actually a GIS shape file, and I had to translate it to a PDF and then to a JPEG to get it into the PowerPoint. So if this is not that readable, let me know, and I can put up a hard copy, and hopefully maybe that'll show up better.
Gary, I think it is attachment 5 in our packet, isn't it?
It is. Thank you, Steve. Yeah,
Yeah.
you do have it as a.
So we've got it there if we need it.
You could look along on that, and I think it's a little bit clearer.
Yep.
But I think you can see 405 running along here. Here's the county. Here's 228th Street. The Canyon Park area is outlined in red. Here's the FEMA site, and there's that little area of NB, neighborhood business, across 228 that I alluded to. And here's the expanded Red Barn Village, or the country village area. So the expanded Red Barn Village would actually include areas on both sides of the Bothell-Everett Highway, as well as the Safeway development on the south side of 240th. And you can see the Canyon Park area is approximately 600 acres. You can see the current zoning designations, or the current plan designations, sorry, OB, OP, CB, MVSO, in parts of it, OP, LI, and others. And then the scenario we were looking at would add the Residential Activity Center designation to all of this. The expanded Red Barn Village or Country Village would add either 2800, R4000, or RAC. And the FEMA site, we were looking at potentially adding the same three designations, either R2800, R4000, or RAC, to the existing R9600 and NB. In your packet...
Yeah, before you leave that, we have
Sure.
a couple of questions. I've got a couple, and I think there's a few more up here. So the red line denotes the proposed site, or the proposed size, or is it the current size for Canyon Park and for Country Village and FEMA?
The red line on Country Village essentially shows the area that we've analyzed for adding the RAC designation to.
Okay.
So that amount of land.
All right. In Canyon Park in particular, I'm surprised, I guess, that you wouldn't be including, it looks like you have not included any of the land south of 228th, what I would think of as where the QFC shopping center area is, as well as what was formerly Albertsons on the north side. Is there a reason why that was not included in how you would redesignate this? Yes, and we were really looking at the business park itself as being really the core of the regional growth center, the urban center there. And in addition, I mean, the business park, the land that you see in the red there, seems to be, we think, potentially more ripe for redevelopment in the near future, and in particular for mixed-use development in the future. And Bill, you can add comments if you wish to. I think what's behind, maybe just a little bit more before you comment, Bill, what was kind of behind my question is, sure, we want to add, we need to comply with this to add some capacity. This is a logical place to do it. But I'm also thinking just kind of culturally for our city and our citizens, kind of what we've done for downtown could potentially be in some way carried forward north to the Canyon Park area to create kind of a second downtown, if you will, or a second center. And that's where I'm thinking that the area around both sides of 228 there could potentially be a part of that. But maybe there was a reason why it's not included.
Oh, we agree. And in fact, the regional growth center that's designated in Vision 2040 does include the land south of 405.
Okay.
The Canyon Park commercial area. The reason that there's an area outlined in red is that's where the RAC would be added. There's already an RAC designation south of 405.
Ah, okay.
In
Got
the Canyon Park commercial area.
All right.
So that could redevelop at any time to those higher densities. There is not any kind of residential designation at all in those areas that are shown in red.
Okay, understood. Are there any other questions?
I have one.
Yes.
I had the
Go ahead.
exact same question you did. The second question I have is, and I'm not looking for exact numbers, but what is the potential for doing this type of thing at this location? Meaning, is there vacant land there that's available for somebody to develop an RAC type development on, or does it require redevelopment of an existing building? Or
That's a really good question, and I'm glad you brought that up. Yes, there is some vacant land currently in Canyon Park, not much, but really this is more about positioning ourselves for when redevelopment is warranted. And I've stated this before and gave a lengthy presentation on this at the beginning, but you weren't on the commission then, so I'll just capsulize it.
Okay.
The Canyon Park Business Park was developed in the early 80s and onward. It consists, the early buildings consist of largely single-story tilt-ups that were developed for the uses that were in demand at the time. Things like print shops, trucking companies. So they had a little bit of space up front for office and a lot of space in the back for warehouse. Over time, the demand changed, and it changed for tech uses and Class A office space. So the most recent buildings are 2- and 3-story, high-quality office buildings. So at some point, the land value or the value of the land underneath those initial 1-story buildings is going to appreciate to the point where it's worth more than the buildings on them. Mm-hmm. And when we get to that point, those buildings will be knocked down and replaced with something else. And we're proposing to create the potential for mixed-use development. But we don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Had the economy continued as heated as it was back in 2007 before the Great Recession, I think it would have happened by now. But it cooled off. There's still quite a few vacancies in the Canyon Park Business Park. Those need to fill up before the value of land will reach the point where it warrants knocking the buildings down. So this really is a future-looking exercise. We have to, like Gary was saying, we have to do it. We have to create that capacity to meet our Vision 2040 growth targets, but we don't think it's going to happen right away.
so one last question: Does this the 3 changes, I guess, that you're proposing, does it do that? Does it add the potential units that?
I have a slide that will show you that here.
Yeah, Gary will talk about the capacity that's created.
Thank you.
I appreciate, Gary, didn't mean to interrupt your presentation, but it seemed like it was a worthy sidebar.
Yeah, no, it is, and I apologize. When I created this map, it was to show the scenarios, and I probably should have put some of the surrounding existing plan designations on there, and it may have answered your question for you.
And I just had another clarifying question. So when we talk about capacity, is that referring to how it's zoned, or what buildings are actually
When we talk about capacity for population, we're talking about how many persons the land can hold under the existing planning and zoning designations.
Okay, so we could have a meadow with nobody living on it, but if it's zoned to allow
There's
1,000
capacity there.
people,
That's
then-
correct.
Okay,
That's correct.
thanks.
So, as Bill said, we need to meet these Vision 2040 growth targets. But if you want to, you can look at it almost initially as a paper exercise. We need to be able to show the capacity on paper. Now, whether or not that capacity is ever fully realized is up to the market and how the market does in the future. Vision 2040 says that, theoretically, by 2035 or 2040, that capacity should be there and should be on the ground. We should have grown to that point. But initially, at least for now, we need to be able to show that capacity, to show that we can accommodate it, so that when it does arrive, we're ready for it.
Understood.
So these three scenarios were presented to City Council on February 5th, 2013. And Council was asked to support exploration of the scenarios as part of the 2015 Periodic Plan and Code Update, without committing to the City to any of the scenarios. And at that time, Council expressed, as Bill said, Council expressed such support for exploring the scenarios. With that support from Council to study further, we asked the Snohomish County staff to assess the scenarios to determine what the capacity of the three different scenarios would be under each of those different designations. The reason we asked Snohomish County staff to do that is because in the Snohomish County portion of the city, Snohomish County staff actually accomplished the buildable lands capacity analysis for the cities in Snohomish County. It's a little different in King County. We do that analysis ourselves, but in Snohomish County, the county staff does it for us. It's a better deal, frankly. And so we asked them to use their buildable lands model that we had already been using for the overall capacity analysis to run these different scenarios, and they did that for us. And the assessment shows that the shortfall of 3,554 persons can be made up through utilizing the Canyon Park scenario or through a combination of the three scenarios. And I'll show you the numbers here in just a second. However, because the population shortfall can be made up at Canyon Park, we're recommending that the Planning Commission not consider the FEMA scenario unless you feel strongly about doing so. The reasons there are a couple of reasons for that. In your packet, I mentioned that we feel that particular scenario may not perhaps be as politically palatable as the other two, and it's probably also a less certain future implementable scenario. We think that FEMA will likely leave that site one day, and the site will be available for redevelopment, but that's uncertain. So given that we can accommodate the population shortfall in Canyon Park alone, and certainly through a combination of Canyon Park and Country Village, our recommendation, I think, is to not include the FEMA scenario at this time. Okay, so here's a table that I included in your packet. This is the results of the analysis that the Snohomish County staff ran for us to show the population capacity of the three different scenarios. So what we're looking at here is, there's the Canyon Park scenario, there's the expanded Red Barn Village, or the Country Village, and there's what at the time we called Nike Hill, which is the FEMA site. The first column shows the additional population capacity. The second column shows additional employment capacity, and then the final column shows capacity differences compared with original capacity estimates based on current zoning. And then under Canyon Park, you'll see that there are different scenarios. The first is just under current zoning. Obviously, you get no additional capacity. We asked them to look at two different possible redevelopment timelines, and this shows them as first set of 2035 redevelopable parcels under RAC zoning and a second set of redevelopable parcels under RAC zoning. Bill and I literally sat down with a parcel map of the Canyon Park, the area in red that you saw, and then drove the whole area, and I tried to identify some of the older 80s tilt-up concrete buildings that we felt would go first if the market were to change, and then a second tier that would likely not redevelop for a longer period of time because they're either contain newer structures on them or structures that still meet the market in a better fashion. So that's what those two rows mean in that scenario. You can see that if you include all of the area in red in Canyon Park as redeveloping by 2035, under the RAC designation, we could potentially, the capacity would be almost 4,500 persons. So that's why we're saying that if we put an RAC designation on the Canyon Park area, the area you see in red on the map, we can show that by 2035, if it were all to redevelop, we could accommodate that population shortfall.
Gary, could I make a comment? Or were you going to continue?
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. If you have a comment on that, please do.
So, as Gary just said, adding the RAC to the Canyon Park Business Park provides more than enough capacity to meet our target. However, we think, despite that, we think that it's important to consider changes, at least one of the scenarios that we're proposing, to expanded Red Barn Village, the Country Village area. And the reason for that is maybe not so much to achieve a growth target, but because it more appropriately provides for development of that or redevelopment of that property. And it's really not just Country Village. There's a property just north of that that's in this zoning designation. It's called In Harmony. It's a landscaping place. Right now, it's one of very, very few commercial properties that has just a commercial designation. It's only CB. It's only community business. That's the only designation and implementing zone it has. It's a deep property, as you're probably all well aware. It's really too deep for just retail development. The back part of it is appropriate for multifamily. It has no exposure from the road, and so the target issue aside, we think it's the right thing to do to consider adding some retail or some residential designation and implementing zoning classification to that area. So that's why, even though we can solve the growth target issue just at Canyon Park, we're also proposing that you consider this as well. And I think Gary might have mentioned this before as well, but this is not the night that you have to say yes or no to that, because it'll come back to you in the sub-area plan phase. Now, this is merely an introduction to get you thinking about the issues that we have to address and thinking about these specific proposals. There are, under Expanded Red Barn Village, there are 3 different scenarios, and each one has a different zoning density, so it would have a different yield and number of units. So there's an R4000 scenario that works out to about 10 units per acre. There's an R2800 scenario, and that's about 15 units per acre. And there is an RAC scenario which has no density limit. It's controlled by building envelope and satisfying parking requirements and so forth. So which scenario is appropriate for Country Village is a different conversation than which scenario is appropriate for Canyon Park. Country Village or the Expanded Red Barn Village has a different character. It's a little lower intensity. It's not the kind of hustle and bustle that we're looking for up at Canyon Park. So just be thinking about what Expanded Red Barn Village is like now, what you think it should be like in the future, and just be pondering these 3 different density scenarios for later.
Bill mentioned briefly, and before we move on, I want to touch on it just again. As part of the land use element, we need to address the growth targets and population capacity shortfall. If you decide to recommend doing that through redesignating Canyon Park and or Country Village or an expanded Red Barn Village, those designations will happen in the sub-area plans, because that's where the actual land use designations sit. So we won't actually be putting designations for those in the land use element. When we bring the sub-area plan to you for Canyon Park and for Country Village, that's where you'll see us recommend or the actual designation changes. Does that make sense? So the numbers that Bill talked about, the three scenarios at Country Village or expanded Red Barn Village, and you can see the numbers. An RAC designation would add almost 1,200 persons capacity to that area. An R2800, or about 15 units per acre, would add over 500 persons, and an R4000 designation would add about 333 persons. So, as Bill said, given that we can technically accommodate the population capacity shortfall at Canyon Park, that might give you some more options about how you think about expanded Red Barn Village and what might be appropriate for that area. Any questions on that before I move on, because I know that's a lot of stuff.
Commissioner Clark.
So, just out of curiosity, I'm going to try to say this the best I can, then I can clarify, but are these growth projections or the growth requirements are they a guideline for staff as to whether to encourage or discourage growth overall as the city's concerned? I guess what I'm saying is, once you've reached that growth target, is the staff thinking, okay, we're good enough, or is there some other driver such as economic development or bringing population growth or anything else that come into your consideration?
Well, first of all, under Vision 2040, it's supposed to be a quid pro quo sort of equation. If you're a core city, as we are, we volunteered to be a core city. We volunteered to be an urban center, and then that became renamed as a core city back in the mid 90s. So the council knowingly said we want to grow, we want to accept more population and employment. But the quid pro quo part of that was the promise that the lion's share of funding for infrastructure to support all these jobs and housing and residents would go along with it. And for many years, arguably, that didn't happen. I think the PSRC has recognized that, and in the last 10 years has really made a concerted effort to direct federal money towards centers. So maybe this is getting too much into the weeds, but I guess we'll talk about it now. Our approach to Canyon Park is actually going to be a two-phased approach. The first phase in the 2015 Periodic Plan and Code Update is to add that RAC designation. But we know that's not enough. It's not enough just to say you can have more population there, because you need to have the infrastructure to support it. Right now, the Canyon Park Business Park is made up of super blocks. It's not real easy to travel around. It's not easy to drive through there. It's not easy to walk around. It's not a really friendly place to walk around as a center. And so there will be a second phase of planning for Canyon Park that will be that effort will be very much like the effort that went into downtown. The downtown planning effort was not just about land use designations. It was about the capital facilities that need to go with it. And so in this second phase of planning for Canyon Park, which will probably take place in 2016 and 2017, we'll do the kind of infrastructure planning that's going to go along with that land use planning. Okay, so that's one thing. I guess that gets to part of your question. So we're not just kowtowing to PSRC and Vision 2040 and saying, okay, we'll accept 3,500 or we'll accommodate 3,500 more citizens. We're only going to do it if we think we can do it in a way that makes for a good urban center, a vibrant and thriving urban center, a place where you'd want to be. So yes, we are we're not abandoning all the planning principles that we learned in school and have tried to apply in our careers just to meet this goal imposed on us.
I think I was more asking if say you were at you didn't have a deficit right now, would that be an incentive or a driver to say, hey, we're not going to even consider any zoning changes that might increase population? I guess what I'm saying is, how much does this drive what the city's doing versus other factors that might come into play, like wanting to increase revenue or that sort of thing, in terms of deciding whether to upzone or downzone? I guess is kind of my question.
Yeah. Okay. You can certainly have more capacity than you're required to. There's nothing against that. Having this external pressure to add capacity forces our hand. But it's not the only reason to do that. We might, for economic development reasons, had it not been for this, we might have pursued changes. And as one example, I pointed out that in Country Village, even if we hadn't had this growth target to accommodate, maintaining just a community business designation for that property, it's not good planning anymore. There is not just an acceptance of mixed-use development, but an embrace of it, not just in Bothell, but pretty much nationwide, because it's recognized that separating uses is not the best way to go. You can integrate them and thereby have a much more interesting community.
Thank you.
I might, before we go on to TDR, I might ask just a couple of obvious questions that I asked earlier, and I'll go ahead and I'll even ask them and answer them. And one question I remember I asked before, and this might be for Commissioner Clark's benefit, was the capacities that were given from the county, Snohomish Shore King. Is there any kind of pushback or negotiation that we can do? We can, and I've already asked the question, and I understand the answer is no. It's pretty much we're given these numbers as this is what you have to take. You can exceed them, but you really must plan towards those goals. So am I correct in that first answer to my question?
Yeah, that is correct. And it also begs the question, well, if you have to accommodate this much population in this case, and you have a surplus in King County,
That was my next question.
why can't you
Right.
just ignore the county line and just, we're one city?
Yeah, we have that
Just-
unique presence on two counties.
Yeah. And the answer is from the folks in control of this is a sympathetic head shake. We can't do it. Each county has its targets, and the targets have to be accommodated within the boundaries of the county.
Yep.
Even if there's a two-county city like Bothell that has surplus in one county and a deficit in the other county, you can't just put them together.
Yeah.
We tried that.
So I guess I'll lend a few personal comments, and I really would be interested in just some brief comments and questions at this point from the other planning commissioners. So from my standpoint, not only to meet the growth targets that we've been given from the county, but just my own personal vision of where I'd like to see Bothell head. I'm supportive of this in terms of adding an additional designation. I mean, in my mind, having it RAC would be kind of where my mind is going in terms of all three, even including the FEMA site. My reasons for that is that pushing out not only capacity but capabilities, so that properties closer to where people live, they have the option to walk, bike, or drive a shorter distance to get greater level of services that they might be interested in. Is part of a vision that certainly meets what I would have in mind for Bothell. I think also the point about the Red Barn site in terms of them being deep, so that lends itself more to not so good for commercial, but very good for residential. I mean, residential would be quiet, private, that idea. So my own personal inclination is towards yes, and I'd be very interested in hearing kind of the thoughts from the other planning commissioners. But one question I have before I kind of turn it over, is there a way that we can hear from the the current property owners that either are that are directly affected by this, because when you change zoning, it impacts values, usually positively, to give it greater options for development. But I just want to make sure that we're really pushing out this possibility that we're going to do this, and that our property owners and homeowners aware of this, so that they can provide us with feedback. So there might be some things we haven't thought of. And what is the process for making sure that they're informed about this?
Well, we have noticing requirements. For comprehensive plan amendments and rezones and other things that are area-wide, there is not the requirement to send notices to everyone inside an affected area and within 300 feet of an affected area. But we do want those folks involved. So frankly, we haven't sat down and really talked about what our noticing procedures will be on the sub-area plans.
We don't have to figure that out tonight, but I would like to see us push that a little bit.
Yeah.
And this is a very important.
We have talked about the issue in general terms. We just haven't decided on the specific notification method, I think.
Tactics. So
But I think we've all agreed on staff that we need to, within those sub-areas where there may be planned designation changes, we need to reach out to the folks who may be affected.
as you do that, let them know that the Planning Commission really would like to hear from them. So,
Certainly.
okay.
I was just curious about a few things. I'm trying to put together an understanding here. So clearly there's a pressure we have to increase capacity from the GMA. Are we also getting that same pressure through just the market forces? Are developers trying to build and there isn't the zoning for them to do it?
We haven't. I mean, we get interest from developers on pieces of property all the time, but the market is a very fluid thing, as some of you know, and it doesn't necessarily follow regulatory requirements like growth targets. But we have some interest in the country village properties from developer. We've sat down with Roger Bolanich, who controls a lot of property within the Canyon Park area, and he agrees that it will start redeveloping in the near future. At what point? I mean, he knows probably less, no more than we do when that actual time might be. But so to answer your question, I think yes, we do receive inquiries from developers all the time, and sometimes they jive with what we're thinking, sometimes they don't.
If I could just add to that, there's an interesting coincidence with respect to Country Village, because Gary and I had identified that as a property or an area that really warranted having more development potential. And we went through this exercise with our fellow core city in Snohomish County, Linwood, and then the metropolitan city, Everett, and Snohomish County and PSRC, to just sort of flesh out this idea. Just a few months after that, we were approached out of the blue by a developer and the owner of the Country Village property, expressing interest in doing some multifamily, and I was able to tell them, well, that's funny. We've identified that as a potential plan amendment and code amendment in this plan update. So we've been working with them, and when this sub area comes before you, they will make a presentation to you. I don't know that we're in agreement on density yet in that development, but that's a debate that you'll have. With respect to Canyon Park, this planning effort is way ahead of the market in that area. I can't say that I've heard from anyone up there who is interested in mixed-use development. Roger Bolanich, who, if anyone is a visionary, that man is a visionary, has recognized the potential and future demand for that. But I think the other property owners see it as what it is now, an office park. So this is really, really forward-thinking planning up there.
Okay. And then along those lines, I think you had this number earlier, but what's the current capacity again for the city?
For the whole city?
Yeah.
Gosh, Gary would have that.
Well, it might have been on one of the earlier slides. I'm just curious what the current capacity is compared to our current population.
I think it is in that first table.
I think it might. So we have a capacity surplus in the King County portion of almost 4,500 persons. A capacity in King County portion of almost 4,500 persons, and in the Snohomish County portion of about 3,400. So if you add those two together, you get the total capacity. That's additional capacity.
Okay, so that's capacity over the population.
Yeah.
Correct.
So it looks like then the mandate's a little bit ahead of. It's pushing us further than the free market is, right?
I think that's true.
Yeah, I think that's probably true.
8,000 people.
Yeah.
We're at 41,600 now.
Current population.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, so that's 20%. Wow, so this feels like an artificial urgency. I mean, I guess we can't do anything about that, but just if I'm understanding it correctly.
The time period we're talking here is 20 years. So we're looking at providing a capacity amount for a 20-year period. So
Okay, that's a very helpful reminder. Thanks.
Yeah. It is an artificial urgency, but if you don't plan early, then you get development at lower densities, and you are foreclosing opportunities later
Right.
to provide for those additional jobs and residences.
And that's the difficulty of trying to look out ahead 20 years and anticipate what the need might be and what the market might do. And those are, as I said, sometimes two different things. So yes, there is some artificiality to the whole exercise, but the growth targets are a state requirement that we have to meet. So
Right.
that's why we're here.
Go ahead and continue, Gary. We'll ask more questions when you're done.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so we'll move into the next, I think, major issue in this whole thing. This isn't really an issue as much as I think, an opportunity. And I'll go through this concept called transfer of development rights first. Or it's not a concept; it's a tool. I'll explain it a little bit. And then talk about how it will tie in with the population capacity shortfall in Snohomish County. But up front, I'll let you know that I'm not a TDR expert. I've been looking at this issue for the last 2 years, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of the intricacies of it. It involves legal issues in property rights as well as tax increment financing, which is certainly not my cup of tea. So I'll let you know up front that I'm going to give you a basic primer on it tonight, but on the 24th we'll have two groups of people here who can answer questions about TDR way better than I can. We have a consultant working with us on doing an analysis in the Snohomish County portion for TDR opportunities, and they'll be here next on the 24th, as will King County's TDR manager. So what is TDR? It's a market-driven tool used to preserve rural resource lands from development and focus growth instead into urban areas. So the right to develop land for either residential or commercial purposes is one of what's often referred to as a bundle of rights. Property comes with what's known as a bundle of rights, and you've heard of most of them: water rights, mineral rights, air rights, and the right to develop that property or development rights is part of that whole bundle that you enjoy when you purchase property. A TDR program, or a Transfer of Development Rights programs, allows landowners of designated sending properties to separate out that development right from that whole bundle of development of property rights and sell them to another party. Those sending sites are typically rural or resource lands with farm, forest, open space, or regional trail amenities. Those transferable development rights, or TDRs, are typically bought by developers of designated receiving sites which are within urban growth areas. So you're taking the development potential from a rural area, selling it to a developer, and putting it inside an urban area, onto a piece of property in an urban area. So that piece of property in the urban area, the receiving site, then suddenly has additional development potential because you're adding to it the rural development potential. So those purchased TDRs give developers the ability to build additional houses or commercial floor space or whatever that exceed the number allowed by the zoning base density. So that's important. It's an amount above that allowed by the base zoning. So I put this diagram. This is actually from King County's program, so I recognize that this is their diagram, not ours. This is in your packet. This shows very simply and graphically how TDR works. So up in the top right-hand corner, you have a nice bucolic picture of open space, for example, in the Carnation Valley in King County, which is where a lot of development rights are being sold right now in King County. Those development rights get sold. They go into an urban area, for example, a city, and allow increase in square footage, height, or number of units in that urban area. And what goes back to the rural area is dollars for conservation, because the landowner in those rural areas is paid for those development rights. The landowner in the rural area doesn't lose any of those other property rights. They still have their water rights, their mineral rights, and all the other rights that come with owning land. They're simply giving up the development portion. Normally, a conservation easement is placed on the property that sold the development rights in the rural area. In order to leverage this tool, this transfer of development rights tool, in 2011, I believe it was, the state adopted a program called the Landscape Conservation and Local Infrastructure Program, or LCLIP for short, where counties and cities can realize tax revenues or tax monies by identifying what's called a local revenue development area, or an RDA, to accept TDR credits into. So in other words, Bothell could identify a revenue development area that might include, for example, Canyon Park and the downtown area. That area can be up to 20% of the city's area by assessed valuation. So they don't do it by land area, they do it by assessed valuation, because we're talking taxes here. And the city could say, we understand that property owners in rural areas are selling their development rights, and those are being transferred to urban areas. We're willing to take part in that program. We'll designate an RDA, a revenue development area in Bothell, and within that RDA, we will allow those development rights from the rural areas to be placed on property, and those property owners can realize density bonuses or additional density, whether it's commercial or residential. In return, the city will get taxes that would have gone from the county, instead will come to the city. And there's a formula for how they calculate it. So land within the RDA becomes potential receiving sites for TDR credits. And up to 25% of a city's area by assessed value can be designated as an RDA. Bothell has been allocated up to 365 TDR credits based on Vision 2040 growth forecasts. That's how the growth targets play into this. The city can then choose to utilize between 20 and 100% of its allocated TDR units to accept into our RDA. So this is obviously a very complex concept. So we hired a consultant. Their name is Community Attributes International. This is what they do. They study this sort of thing, and they are figuring out for us how TDR might benefit us through the LCLIP program in terms of tax revenues in the Snohomish County portion. About a year and a half ago, we actually got a grant from King County to analyze the potential for TDR in the King County portion of the city. CAI, Community Attributes International, did that analysis for us. They only did it for the King County portion because that's where the funding for the analysis came from, and King County wouldn't allow us to. We asked them if we could include the Snohomish County portion of the city in that analysis, and they said, no. We just want you to study the King County portion because that's what we're paying for. So that's what we did. That's the opportunity we had at the time. It was a grant. It was grant monies that were available, so we took advantage of it. That analysis by CAI showed that the city could potentially realize as much as $3 million of tax revenues, although it also showed that the way we would get up to that $3 million would be a little bit difficult, we think, because the conclusion of their study was that in the King County portion of the city, we would have to provide developers an incentive in terms of additional floor area and parking reductions in order to get them to accept to purchase TDRs in Bothell.
If I could just jump in, is this
Sure.
$3 million, is it per year, per?
No, that's the total amount, and it's disbursed by the county over a 25-year period. And it's only $3 million if we decide to accept all 365 TDR credits that are allocated to us, and utilize all of those within an RDA that we would establish.
Thanks.
So it's $3 million, but it's not quite as sweet as $3 million might sound at first blush. So when you combine that 25-year period, along with the fact that we would have to offer additional floor area and a reduction in parking requirements in the King County portion of the city, we don't think that it sounds quite as sweet as we thought it might. The results of that King County analysis were presented to Council back in 2012, and Council thought the same thing. They came to the same conclusion that the staff and the consultant had. So the next obvious question that Council had for us at that presentation in 2012 was, well, what about Snohomish County? So we told them that in order to analyze Snohomish County, we would need some additional funding or identify additional funding to have community attributes going away and do that analysis. Council essentially gave us the go-ahead to do that. So CAI is currently expanding that analysis. They've been working on it for the past few months, and we should have those results for you on the 24th. Our gut feeling is that we think that there is a much greater potential within the Snohomish County portion of the city to utilize TDR, and here's why. It's pretty simple. The Canyon Park and the Country Village areas, as we've already said to you, don't currently have a residential component on them. A developer can't go into Canyon Park now and build any residential units at all. So it occurred to Bill and I, and we posited this to the consultant, well, what if we tell developers, you can build residential units in Canyon Park, we'll put a RAC designation on there, but you can only do it if you participate in the TDR program. So that's what we're having CAI look at for us. No one has done TDR in the state yet from what we call a base of zero. All of the programs that have been implemented to date in Washington State, developers have had some ability to do residential in an area already, and they're just getting bonuses. We have sort of a unique opportunity in the Snohomish County portion in these two areas because there currently is no ability to develop residential. So we think this is really serendipitous with having to meet this population capacity shortfall in the Snohomish County portion, that this tool exists where the city could realize some real tax increment financing revenues over time and we think developers will likely be excited about it. Cities can bond against those future tax revenues. So it's not just that the revenues come to the city over time. The city can bond up front, and institutions have been willing to bond cities, to provide funding to cities up front. So we'll know more on the 24th about what the potential is in the Snohomish County portion, but I wanted to at least get the concept of transfer of development rights out to you and make you aware of this possibility.
Before we move on from,
I'm sorry, I'm a slide ahead here.
are you done with the TDR part of your presentation?
I am. If I've probably confused you, I know.
No, you haven't.
So-
But maybe if you wouldn't mind us just jumping in, any questions on the part of the commission on TDR?
Yeah.
Commissioner Cape.
Few questions, Gary.
Yeah.
Thanks for the presentation. The sending sites, what are the limiting factors? Is it size or area as far as who can participate? Is that fully defined? Is that sort of a...
It is, and if you like, I can provide you more information on that. I tried to give you some information on TDR in your packet, but what I gave you was fairly limited. I didn't want to overwhelm you with it right now, but I'd be glad to give you more information on TDR and how it works in Washington State.
Okay.
Essentially, sending sites are, again, they're rural resource lands, and the way that a TDR credit is defined depends on the county program, and the county we're most familiar with at present is King County because we've been talking to them mostly up to now. King County is further ahead with their TDR program than Snohomish County is. Snohomish County has a adopted TDR program, but they're not as far along with it as King County, and King County has actually been getting cities to participate, and they're actually trading TDR credits within King County. I can't tell you what specifically what a TDR credit from any given site in King County is worth, because there's a complex formula that they use for any given sending site, based on a number of different factors, and some of those are market factors. But certainly, when CAI comes and talks to you on the 24th, they can give you more information on how that's calculated. I apologize for not being able to go into that depth for you, but it's...
No, that's okay. I was just looking for generalities more
Yeah.
than anything, but that's fine. Overall, I think it sounds like a good program and a perfect fit for what we're trying to do in Snohomish County. Not only does it incentivize the city by getting tax revenue, but also allows people living in rural areas to offset some of their property taxes if, as the market's picking up, all their property taxes are moving upwards. So, yeah, I think it would be a good fit for what we're looking at.
Well, one advantage that Bill and I weren't aware of that we just learned recently from the King County manager of their TDR program is that if the city defines an RDA, a receiving area that includes both county portions of the city, even if we only accept TDR credits into the Snohomish County portion of the city, we can still take advantage of tax credits from King County as well. And that's something that surprised us, but in a really good way. We'll hear more about that from Darren Greevy, who's the King County TDR manager. He's agreed to come on the 24th and talk about why they want to be involved in our TDR program, even if we think we'll only take advantage of TDR credits in the Snohomish County portion of the city. There really are a lot of advantages.
Any other questions?
I have a couple.
Yes.
Two questions. One's just a clarification. I noticed that at one point there was a statement that said something like 20 to 100% of allocated TDR units can be used by a jurisdiction. Is that does that mean that we're obligated to do 20%, or is that and is that currently in effect, or is this just an
Yes,
idea?
if a city decides to participate in the TDR program, you have to accept at least 20 TDR credits.
Okay, so
That-
we're not obligated to participate, but if we do, then that
Yes, that's
20%
correct.
minimum. Okay.
That's correct. And then this is over a 25-year period, I believe it is. And over that period, there are milestones that the city has to reach. So at 5 years, we have to have accommodated a certain number, and at 10 years, and so forth. So what community attributes will show you when they come on the 24th is based on their market analysis, what sort of revenues can be generated through the LCLIP program by accepting different amounts of our total of 365. So there's a bit of a balancing act there. You have to look at it and say, okay, we could generate this much revenue if we do 50% or 75%, but then we have to meet these targets. What's the potential reality of doing that? So there are definitely some balanced trade-offs that have to be made.
And the second question is, at first I was thinking this must all be within the jurisdiction of the city, but it sounds like it's a broader area that can be utilized. Is it countywide? Is it statewide? Is it urban growth boundary inside versus outside? What are the
Right. Well, the counties are setting up their own TDR programs, so they are identifying TDR credits from their rural areas to be utilized within their urban areas, and then they're trying to get cities to enter into that program and enter into interlocal agreements with the county to place those TDR credits into receiving areas within the cities, so within urban growth areas.
So it wouldn't be possible to transfer at some point to do this transfer from, say, Pierce County to the city of Bothell, or it has to be within,
No, I think there is that possibility, as I
There is.
understand it. Yes.
or even Eastern Washington or something? I mean, that's
Yeah, I'm not sure how far it might extend, but I think there are possibilities to accept TDR credits from sending areas that are outside of, for example, King County or Snohomish County. However, we might want to consider if we decide to go forth with a TDR program, we might want to think about what sending areas might make sense for Bothell as a community. For example, in King County, some of their sending areas are located in the Bear Creek watershed, which is the closest watershed to us. It includes parts of Woodinville and areas east of Woodinville. We might decide that because we're closest to that watershed and we have that watershed has some impact on us, that might be where we want to take credits from.
Is there an emphasis on transferring from outside the urban growth boundary to inside? Is that a factor at all?
Yes, all of the sending areas are outside of UGAs.
Okay.
So the idea is to preserve those rural resource lands. One of the big sending areas in King County right now is the Carnation Valley. So if you drive through the Carnation Valley, which is literally just 10 minutes outside of Redmond, you come down off the hill in Redmond, you're in the valley, you're in a very pristine rural area. There are dairy farms throughout that valley that are still in existence right now because some of those dairy farmers have sold their development rights to their property to King County cities, and that has allowed them, the revenue they've gotten from those development rights has allowed them essentially to keep going as dairy farms.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think we have any further questions at this point.
Thank you. Okay, I think I can go through the rest of the issues in relatively short manner. Those were the two big ones. So one of the issues that we need to look at in the land use element, or that staff is asking you to look at as part of the land use element, is the land use policy LUP4 and the definition for net buildable area. Currently, land use policy LUP4 defines net buildable area as being, for the purposes of the comprehensive plan, shall mean the gross land area measured in acres minus land area in roads and other rights-of-way, surface, stormwater retention, detention, water quality facilities, critical areas buffers, and land dedicated to the city. So from gross land area, we subtract those things, and you come up with a net buildable area, and that's what density is based upon for developers. However, as low-impact development techniques for handling stormwater runoff become more the required norm than an alternative technique, the amount of land area taken up by stormwater facilities is getting bigger and bigger, and I'm sure Eric and Pat are fully aware of this. Many jurisdictions already allow credit for such facilities in land use density calculations, and some even give credit for things such as critical area buffers. We don't, and we haven't typically. But because LID is becoming more and more the norm and takes up more ground area, we think it's appropriate at this time to remove stormwater facilities, stormwater retention, detention, and water quality facilities from this definition of how net buildable area is calculated. So we'll be bringing that forward to you on the 24th. The change in the LUP4 would be very simple. We would simply be as simple as striking that little section of the definition from the definition. Think about it. If you have questions, feel free to contact us if you want to discuss it more.
Steve, can I ask a general question?
Commissioner Clark.
I have a general question. I'm sitting here kind of feeling a sense of urgency about needing to comment on every single thing because I don't really know where we're going from here in terms of, is this our last chance to say, gee, I think we should consider this?
No, certainly not.
And what is the vehicle for doing that? Are we going to be able to comment after the next meeting as well, or you just said, and the reason I asked this question, you just said contact us. Is that an acceptable thing for us to do, to have a private conversation? Or?
Certainly. You know, we want to give you the information tonight and to let you know this is an issue in the land use element.
Okay.
We will bring you a recommendation forward on the 24th, and we're going to recommend that you do this. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is a staff proposal here. But you'll certainly have a chance to talk about it more on the 24th, ask more questions, deliberate amongst yourselves, and be on the 24th, I anticipate, as well.
So it's not necessary for us to give you feedback before the 24th, before you bring that necessarily. If say, we wanted to suggest a modification or suggest something else.
You know, if you have comments on that and thoughts about it, I'm absolutely happy to take that input now. Absolutely.
I don't want to lengthen this meeting any more than it already is. So I want to be sensitive to everybody else, but this is a
No, it will be coming back on the 20th.
section that's near and dear to my heart, so I would like to.
Yes, and I figured it was.
Okay.
We will be having a more extensive discussion of it on the 24th, I think, you'll have more opportunity for deliberations on the 24th. I should put it that way. I should say it that way.
Thank you.
The next issue was incorporating physical activity into the land use element, which is now a GMA requirement. Essentially what the GMA means when they talk about that is making cities provide more opportunities for pedestrianization, for walking, for parks, for trails, for physical activity in general. Some aspects of our current plan already help achieve this. For example, when we adopted the downtown plan and regulations, we did make the downtown area more walkable and more pedestrian friendly. So by doing that, we provided more opportunities for physical activity. Again, two policies moved from the community services element to address this requirement, and I've simply made the comment that additional policies may be needed. To be honest with you, I haven't really looked at this specific issue a whole lot before tonight. I did provide you, Redmond has already completed their periodic plan and code update, and they did put a couple of additional policies in their plan to address this. So I put those in your packet, something for you to think about. I'll be looking at them between now and the 24th as well, and when we come back on the 24th, I'll have a recommendation for you on perhaps some new policies as well.
If I could just jump in, any planning commission comment or question on that?
The GMA requirement is actually fairly broad, I think, but it's a requirement that we're now required to.
I think the only thing
look at.
that I noticed in the idea of promoting physical activity in urban planning, I certainly don't oppose that. It's something I think we want to do. But and in fact, I went ahead and printed out the RCW and looked at the entire paragraph that you mentioned in your packet, Gary. I think the only thought I had was just there's a lot of uses mentioned in the RCW: agricultural, timber production, housing, commerce, industry, recreation, open spaces. Why they felt the need to kind of specifically call out physical activity in urban planning, to me, I was like, I think we easily could have just said, recreation and physical activity, and called it a day. So I just thought it was a little unusual. I mean, an argument could be made to call out for economic activity or some other type of very profitable activity. Why they felt the need to do that, I don't know. They think we have a physical fitness problem in our state, or what's kind of behind that? I don't know. I don't want to belabor it, but I was interested in just the thought.
Had at least one legislator for whom that was an important issue, and he or she was able to get enough votes to support changing the law. You know, it could be as simple as that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that just had a comment. I'm not necessarily don't oppose it. I just thought it was interesting. And so as we look at implementing that in the city of Bothell, I mean, whether we want to actually specifically call it out or integrate it into our recreation and physical activity agendas for land use is fine with me.
Yeah, well, you don't have to do much. If you saw the Redmond policy, they pretty much just regurgitated the language in state law, and you could hardly do less than that and comply.
Yeah, I
That
did
was my
see the
feeling.
Redmond kind of the way they implemented it. It looked good to me. I liked it. So.
Their policy, I think, basically said consider utilizing urban planning approaches that promote physical activity. I think they changed some of the words a little bit, but as Bill said, not very much. All right, and moving on to the what is the final issue for the evening. And this is review of Bothell Municipal Code 1206-140B9, which is residential uses. Again, this was brought forth on the 2014 docket of plan and code amendments to Council at the request of Mrs. Harkonnen. Council initiated review of the regulation as part of this periodic plan and code update and designated the Planning Commission to review this regulation. The regulation currently permits up to 8 unrelated persons to reside in a single-family dwelling, and there are 2 exceptions that are provable by the director, and they have to do one with safe houses for women, women's shelters, and the other has to do with a couple of RCWs that talk about not discriminating against handicapped persons and providing them the same opportunities for housing that we provide everyone else. So that's not an exception that I think we would ever have to use, but they're there under state law. So again, the code currently, and for as long as I can remember, I think as long as Bill can remember, has permitted up to 8 unrelated persons to reside in a single-family dwelling. Mrs. Harkonnen is here. She has patiently sat through an awful lot of material on some really dry stuff. So if the commission wanted to provide her the opportunity to speak with you, staff would be absolutely in favor of that, and she could tell you firsthand what her concern with this portion of the code is.
We'd be very open to hearing from you if you'd like to come and introduce yourself and just come forward. Yeah, please come forward and just state again your name and the city you reside in. I'm assuming it's Bothell, but just for the record that you reside in Bothell.
My name is Joanne Harkonnen, and my husband and I live at 18516 94th Avenue Northeast in Bothell. It's between Bothell High School and Popkini Field.
Excellent.
And-
Yeah. So we'd love to hear from you.
And
If you could
we've
keep your comments to 3 to 4 minutes, that would
Yeah.
be great.
We've lived there since 1964 and raised our family there, and hope to stay there for a few more years. We became aware of this portion of the code when a house near us was remodeled and essentially has become a rooming house. It has anywhere from 6 to 10 cars parked. The residents that are there now are not an issue, but we do express some concern for the city allowing that much density of unrelated persons in what's supposed to be a single-family area. We appear to have, at least currently, a lot of areas that are designated in the city with regards to multiple housing. And I hope that we cannot move beyond wanting to maintain some areas throughout the city that are still friendly and to single families and to those kinds of neighborhoods. And that primarily is our concern. Until the remodel there, we did not were not even aware that the code was written the way it is, because it never had been an issue. But I feel, along with many of the positive things that have happened in our area, that the continuation of the potential for that, and certainly I know the need for affordable housing, we still need to be aware of a need to maintain neighborhoods that appeal to single families. That primarily is, you can, if you have any questions about it, I'd be happy to try and address those. I know that other cities in the area have had issues with this kind of a boarding house, rooming house developments in single families, and perhaps some attention could be given to looking to see how some of the other areas are handling that circumstance.
I'd like to say thank you very much for coming forward. We very much appreciate it. As we work on the changes to our code, we often we always want to hear from citizens in terms of how those changes might impact them. I have a couple of questions, and then there might be a few more. So you mentioned at this point there hasn't been any negative impact from this, but how about from the residents?
No, there has not been since this final remodel. There was for a while, but that particular group of residents had moved on. It's just not as welcoming, I don't feel, to families as it is to a house full of single individuals.
I can imagine some of the impacts are parking.
How
how about noise? Has there been any police or additional public safety activity?
Not with this group. No, I would not say that. That could change, I suppose, as different people come and go. But I did bring a picture. It's not a good one, but we have in the evening anywhere from 6 to 10 cars parked on the lot, and they're not racing up and down the street. They're not standing in the middle of the road yelling, but it's just not as welcoming, we
All
don't
right,
feel,
thanks.
for families.
Any other questions?
I have one quick one.
Clark.
This is for staff. Are there, along with this allowance of having eight unrelated people in one house, are there some regulations that go along with that, such as having to make sure you provide the parking that would, if somebody is going to remodel a house in this way, is there any sort of requirement for additional parking as you increase the number of unrelated people?
Well, first of all, before I answer that, in addition to up to 8 unrelated persons, the code also allows several other uses as outright permitted uses in single-family areas that allow more than perhaps your single-family unit. So adult family homes are permitted, residential care facilities, which allow between 5 and 15 disabled persons, rooms for roomers or boarders for up to 8 persons, and rooms for the use of domestic employees. The zoning code requires a basic number of parking spaces for single-family structures, and then there are footnotes to the use tables that, in some cases, require additional parking for certain uses, but not for the up to unrelated persons use.
So if we were to make a code change, what type of recommendations would you envision making?
Well, our recommendation at this point, at least, as I said in my staff packet, is to make no change. We feel that the issues that potentially arise from having up to 8 unrelated persons living in one structure are probably code enforcement issues, whether that be traffic issues, parking issues, or noise issues, and that perhaps they're better addressed through code enforcement or police action rather than through zoning. I also have a concern that if we were to change this specific portion of the code, we would have to look at all of the other uses, such as roomers or boarders or adult family homes or residential care facilities at the same time, since they also are allowed.
And I understand those needs, the adult family homes and group homes of various kinds, but it maybe seems like a fine line in between those and what our concerns are.
Understood.
One thing I'm sorry.
Commissioner Gastineau.
So, has Debbie? Have you gone to Debbie?
I have talked to Debbie, yes.
And what is? My other question would be: there's parking anytime. Is parking allowed outside of a designated parking area? I guess in the front of a house, can you have parking in the an unpaved area in front of a house and that type of things? Is that
Sure, the code requires minimum parking, but a property owner can certainly provide additional parking, and of course, on-street parking is permitted. Debbie has not seen this as an issue for code enforcement. She said, if I get called out to a noise issue or a traffic issue, it might just as likely be in a single-family neighborhood with all single families living there, or a multifamily neighborhood. She said, I haven't really noticed a specific issue with homes that may be occupied by unrelated persons. One thing I haven't been able to do up to now, though, just because of time resources, research what other cities allow. But I think my gut feeling is that 8 is a pretty common number. A lot of municipal codes crib from each other, and this is a code section that goes back a way, I think. So I'm happy to do the research, and I'll do that before the 24th, but my guess is 8 is a pretty common number. Some jurisdictions may allow more, and some may allow fewer.
I think that Bellevue addressed this within the past year, and some other, around. It's just hard for us to envision that this is a single family, but okay. Any other questions you have of me?
I don't think we have any, but thank you very much for coming and spending your time. Bill, did you have any comment? Or
I was just going to say that actually Ms. Harkinen is correct, and I was recalling also that Bellevue has had an issue with this, and that I know that they devoted some resources to it. So I think that would be useful, just in the interest of thoroughness, to see what came out of that effort.
I agree.
So we'll make sure that we do that.
Yep. Thank you.
So to sort of wrap up tonight, I wanted to just give the Commission a sense of where we think the land use element is going to go after tonight, and what I think we'll be looking for from the Planning Commission. So tonight, the purpose again was to provide the Commission with information and respond to questions, and hopefully we've done that. There is a lot of information here tonight, and some of it is complex, so I want to make sure that you all know that if you have additional questions between now and the 24th, feel free to contact me, and I'll provide whatever information I can for you. On September 24th, we will have the TDR consultant and the King County TDR manager on hand to provide results of the Snohomish County TDR LCLIP analysis and respond to questions for you. I'll also provide some examples of TD ordinances and regulations from other jurisdictions. I will provide additional information for you on the issue that we just discussed, the 8 unrelated persons issue. And we can certainly provide whatever Bellevue has done in the past year. I'm currently working with our GIS folks to update the land use element graphics, LU1 through LU6, and we'll provide updated graphics for you to see on the 24th. And then we'll provide a draft recommendation on at least some of the issues, such as LUP4 and incorporating physical activity and integration of community services policies and actions, and BMC 1206-140. I'm happy to bring those recommendations to you. With regards to the TDR and capacity analysis, we may hold off on specific policy language recommendations until we have a better feel from the consultant on things and what the analysis says. And then I'm anticipating that in October you'll probably see this back, and the date I've got in mind is October 22nd. And at that time, I think we could probably provide recommendations on TDR with some draft policies and regulations. I think just to give you a preview of what TDR policy, draft policies and regulations might look like, I think what we've been talking about at the staff level and with the consultant up to now is, in this periodic plan and code update, sort of laying the table for TDR to set up a TDR program and get the basis for it going policy-wise, and perhaps with some basic regulations. And then following the plan and code update, we would actually spend the second half of 2015 and 16 implementing a TDR program, so doing all of the work that would entail. At least I think that's our vision at this time.
It is our vision, and just to prepare you, Gary mentioned this before, but I really wanted to emphasize it, and that is that we're proposing use of TDR in a way that even these experts have not done before. Gary mentioned before that in literally every prior instance, some base amount of housing was allowed. What we're proposing, because we're talking about an area where residential uses aren't allowed at all right now, it's just office, professional, light industrial. We're proposing that if you want to do any residential, then you have to buy TDR credits. We had a conference call with the folks from CAI a few weeks ago, and we, because they had misinterpreted their initial analysis, missed the boat a little bit. And so we explained what we had in mind, and there's a long silence on the other end of the line. So we want you all to know what the city proposal is. They may come in. We think that they'll understand it by the time they come to you. But this is really different. And the other part of it is that Gary mentioned that 365 TDR credits have been allocated to Bothell. If you'll recall, the population capacity that would be created in Canyon Park if we were to put an RIC designation on it is 4,400 people. And let's say, just to make the math simple, that's about 2,000 units at about 2 people per unit. That 1,000 units is still a heck of a lot more than the 365 TDR credits that would come Bothell's way. So there's a possibility that we could accept TDR more than just 365 TDR credits. In other words, that we could take some other jurisdictions' credits, and whether we would get more than the 3 million for doing that or not is still something that's up in the air. So there is a tremendous amount of potential in the Canyon Park area for accepting TDR credits. One project, literally one project, could satisfy all 365, and that's assuming it's 1 credit per unit. But TDR is like playing the guitar. They say that the guitar is the easiest instrument to play poorly and the hardest instrument to play well. TDR is kind of like that. We have, Gary and I feel that we have this surface knowledge of what TDR is, but this is a case where the devil is really in the details. It gets really complicated really fast, and we're going to try to coach the fellow from King County and the folks from CAI to communicate this in a way that's understandable to everybody, because they end up losing us pretty fast.
Well, we'll have you playing TDR guitar like Clapton here in a year.
Ooh, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Well, I have to say, initially, as I became familiar with it, my thought was kind of, hey, we'll take a pass on this. But thinking about it in terms of Snohomish County, learning a little bit more about it, learning how we can kind of guide where those credits go, I'm intrigued to learn more. So I'm really looking forward to that.
I would encourage you all to simply get on your favorite internet browser and Google transfer of development rights, King County, Snohomish County. There's a lot of resources online. There's an organization called Forterra that has done a lot of work with TDR, and in fact was fairly instrumental in helping to get the legislation for TDR implemented in the state in 2011. Going to their website, they've got some good information. King County has a lot of information. But if you've got the opportunity and the time and the interest, do a little bit more research if you can.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for your patience tonight. We don't like to batter you with a lot of complex stuff over an hour and 40 minutes if we don't have to, but we kind of felt tonight we really had to lay the table for the rest of the element.
No, I really think it was outstanding, Gary, and I think we needed to do it. As I mentioned at the opening, I think that this is just right in terms of a bullseye as far as what we as a planning commission need to really work on and own and work with you on this. So I have no problem with kind of the process that we went through, and it was interactive rather than waiting until you were done. We kind of chose to go ahead and interrupt and kind of conduct the meeting that way. So looking at our calendar, it looks like on a week from today we will have a meeting, but this will be on the transportation element.
Correct.
And then on the 17th, public hearing on proposed code amendments regarding ADUs.
Correct.
And then, as you've mentioned, on the 24th, this follow-up on the land use element and transportation element. So that's pretty much what our calendar looks like.
Yes, I think the calendar for September is pretty well set. I don't anticipate any changes.
So I think at this point, we'll entertain a motion to continue the public hearing to September 10th, the periodic plan and code update. And if I could hear a motion from the Planning Commission to that effect.
Yeah, I move that we continue the public hearing on the 2015 periodic plan and code update to September 10th.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Looking at the remainder of our agenda, I really don't see any old business reports from staff.
I have none unless Bill does.
Any reports from members? Hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.